If you stand at the corner of Church and New Streets in Bethlehem, on the spot where H.D. was born, and survey the public, you will find that 9 out of 10 passersby do not know her name. Despite 2 historical markers that explain her literary significance and local connection, one in front of City Hall and the other at the entrance to the Bethlehem Area Public Library, the general public still does not know Hilda Doolittle. So, on November 14th, 2018, poet Cleveland Wall joined 13 community leaders at Bethlehem City Hall for a public reading of Hilda Doolittle's work, thus inaugurating a year-long celebration of the poet called Finding H.D. 4 organizations, Lehigh University English Department, Bethlehem Area Public Library, Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center, and Mock Turtle Marionette Theatre, partnered to curate a series of public readings, book talks, lectures, panel discussions, walking tours, and forest meditations, as well as theatrical, visual, and musical performances, all designed to explore H.D.'s work and life. H.D. was born in Bethlehem in 1886 and died in Switzerland in 1961. Her father, Charles Doolittle, was professor of mathematics and astronomy at Lehigh University. Her mother, Helen Woley Doolittle, was an accomplished musician and artist in the Moravian community, and her uncle, John Frederick Woley, was founder of the Bach Choir of Bethlehem. H.D. was profoundly influenced by her maternal grandmother, whom she called Mommalee, Elizabeth Weiss Woley, who shared with her granddaughter a heterodox strand of Moravian theology that celebrated the female Holy Spirit, the Sanctus Spiritus. This concept of female divinity provided H.D. with a means of rewriting the biblical story of Mary and retracing the feminine divine through diverse religious practices in her book-length poem trilogy. H.D.'s innovative and experimental poetry and prose established her as a leading modernist in the early 20th century, and she is widely recognized today as a queer feminist visionary. H.D. remains the most influential literary figure in the Lehigh Valley. The first year of Finding H.D. culminated in October 2019 with the premiere of The Secret, a new mixed media play about H.D., produced by Mock Turtle Marionette Theatre, performed at Touchstone Theatre's Festival Unbound, conceived and structured by playwright Doug Royston, devised by the ensemble cast of actors, puppeteers, and musicians, and directed by me, Jennie Gilrain. At the end of our play, The Secret, H.D., played by a puppet, asks the audience the same urgent question that her grandmother Mommalee asks her in The Gift. Who will follow the music, Hilda? Who will follow the music? In 2018, when we began this journey of Finding H.D., our ultimate hope was that artists in our community, poets, painters, composers, filmmakers, would accept H.D.'s challenge to recognize, claim, and exercise their gifts, to follow the music, and continue to make art inspired by the poet. Cleveland Wall and Company have done just that, introducing Radical Freedom, Poets on the Life and Work of H.D., the first in a series of virtual performances by artists inspired by this most influential literary figure, this queer, feminist visionary, our patron saint of the arts, Hilda Doolittle.
All right, thank you, Jennie Gilrain, and thanks to Doug Royston of Mock Turtle Marionette Theatre for inviting us to be a part of the Finding H.D. program, and to Virtual IceHouse tonight for including our program in the series. So my name is Cleveland Wall, and I was really thrilled and excited to be invited to pull together this group of poets to engage with H.D.'s work and life and produce new work to keep it going here in the Lehigh Valley. So I have an amazing group of poets to share with you. We have Nanette Smith, Sienna Mae Heath, Lynn Alexander, Katherine Falk, and myself. I'm going to read my poems at the end of the program. So settle in and enjoy an interesting journey of poetry of H.D. Thanks.
Sea Lily, 1916, H.D. Reed, slashed and torn, but doubly rich, such great heads as yours drift upon temple steps, but you are shattered in the wind. Myrtle bark is flecked from you, scales are dashed from your stem. Sand cuts from your petal, furrows it with hard edge like flint on a bright stone. Yet though the whole winds slash at your bark, you are lifted up, aye, though it hiss to cover you with froth. My name is Nanette Smith, and when Cleveland invited me to join this group of poets responding to H.D., I thought it would be a natural for me because I had only to dig back in my files from many years ago and find a series that I wrote after H.D. 17 poems in imitation of her early style, each with a seashell title called Star Shells. But I saw I had outgrown that effort. Though I still liked what I did, I felt that it just wasn't really expressive of my style now. So what I did was to braid newer commentary, but the commentary is poetry, through the 3 older pieces. Now, not to confuse you, but what I'm going to do is tell you what number it is. There's 17, and I'm only reading 3, so don't worry. And then I'll put 18, 19, and so forth. Those are the newer ones, and they'll braid through it. You'll hear there's a different voice. So I'll begin, and this is also called Star Shells. 18. I wanted to be her. I was an imagiste manquée, my own style hermetic like hers, my own life hermaphroditic like hers. I took her shells up in my hand and derivative, I wrote number 1, false angel wings. Not soft as fall, but shell horn thin soft, its fold formed, that shield, that wing unfurled as we fell. Not lust, but fallen like soft sin, slime trail, its lisping lifts, sea-seared that speech. Mysterious and cultic was our woman love, white letters unfolding one over one upon white sand and pinkish whole whorled. How the whole world of your mind, beloved, horn-binded like a book, makes all that known. The worms, the moths, the ants, and the snail, they never failed. If fallen, false, unfolds. 19. I wrote of obscure shells I'd never seen because I liked the names of them. It was pretentious, really. I wanted to be H.D., to be her postmodern, to be postmodern to her modern. I wrote the cut-ribbed arc, Antilles' glassy bubble, tinted cantharis. Number 5, bittersweet clam. integrity of shell, clam, fan, winged and angry. The castle is the queen's. The rubbed away part reveals a jar. A word mediating the little sleep Z's and the dream of Ezra. When we drink, it is bittersweet, like white wine and sign sensed, and influenced in the hard phrase of men. When we flake off the earth, metal and spade, the stars float up like shells, and the beautiful final jade. I'm going to refer to Breyer in the next couple of things. Breyer was H.D.'s longtime woman lover, so that's who that is. H.D. poems did not yield to me easily, which is also the beauty of shells. I wanted to hide my pearls, the hagiographical and the biographical, to be unpacked someday by an admirer who would, it turns out, to be only my older self. Number 11, Pennsylvania, Lucine. I intersected with the poet's gangly body brought back in death, and I, a girl born north to Pennsylvania, both our bearings jarred and alien aligned. Was her stone placed by then, shells set, embedded, fine spun furs dappling? Bethlehem, what sun stitched up by shadow, what walls which do not fall. She was that small, snake slender, like Elle, my leggy girl, upon my bed. I have seen it shed, its skin like an old dried weed. I have seen the sediment rebel. It was the salt, she'd write. Why shells? Sapphic. The shell implies, gives body to omissions and elisions, intense. That is its tell, and no new continent. Number 21. I looked and looked for H.D.'s grave. The shells, native to my hand, not inland, false, not Bethlehem, not ocean-born. When I found her, I found I had grown out of her. I had lost and found my own briar and my own mirror. Poetry can be polemic, beauty, or a species of nostalgia. Poetry can be protection, lift you up and cover you like a shell upon a worm. Thank you.
As I've come to know H.D., I value her gift of living in between. Poets tend to have a foot in two worlds, perhaps multiple worlds. Though H.D., miraculously, even in death, creates a space in between the familiar, in between familiar worlds, where she claims radical freedom. And she expresses this in the poem I'm about to read by her. She says she is escaped from the lot of men. And I love this line, and I feel it really resonates now for me and for many of us as we are apart in 2020 and yet really reclaiming our place in nature, in the natural world. And as I felt about a year ago when I received this poem at Little Pond during the forest bathing retreat that honored H.D., hosted by Anissa George. I felt, reading this, living in between, living in the great outdoors, it can be lonely, and yet full of the lush quietude I feel we need most now. And living in between is a gift. Embracing angles when others draw binary lines is a gift that she gave us with this poem. H.D. writes, "Shall I lie in the meadows sweet, escaped from the lot of men, like a fawn in the desert, like a wind by the river bank? Again, again, shall I rest, ecstatic in loneliness, apart in the haunted forest? And such organic lines, as I mentioned, can be found in nature, in the place that H.D. described in that poem. My name is Sienna Mae Heath. This first poem I wrote in the voice of a mama deer to her fawn. It is based on a true story. This summer, a young doe was run over at the community garden I'm a part of. And the story goes is when a good man carried away her body, the fawn watched the whole time. Fortunately, the young family has adopted, another young family of deer has adopted this fawn as their own, and I am so grateful because in these uncertain times, nearly every evening at dusk when I am gardening there, this family and this deer fawn welcome me to walk with them among the wheat and among the blooming thistles. This poem I wrote is called When You're Ready, a distant call to H.D.'s ability to claim radical freedom in the natural world and inspire the inevitable rising of the divine feminine. When you're ready. My child, after my death, you'll find another. Not all mammals are so kind, but deer, oh dear, they form families like people adopting any or all who need a living, prancing mother. Dear one, after my death, if I may leave you young by way of a speeding, fleeting farm truck, wait for me. See the good man who carries my body. Whimper in the tall wheat. Crouch and cower from subsequent passing headlights. Be careful. But don't lay down and die young with me. When you're ready, let dawn crack open your sorrow. Let a single sunbeam break open your hope. And find our ancestral tree line. You know the one, and distant cousins will welcome you to their nest. I promise, my child, you will always be loved if you try. The second poem I wrote is also in honor of H.D.'s ability to claim radical freedom and rise like the divine feminine she is and was in nature, in the garden. This poem is called June. I left our garden in June. It was my fault what happened to you next. Blame it on the staccato nod I flung to the man mowing so close to your budding faces. The same man who had lifted my veil and wrapped a ringlet of my red hair around his finger and vowed to always care for me, his delicate flower. Severed and stung, I fled the scene, clutching our jar of change to trade smooth coins for hard cash and a light love for a lingering loss. Without me, dear poppies, as the ladies of the land, you shaded the purple pansies at your feet, our little girls. Closing your eyes to the tender vernal breeze, waiting for a warmth that would not follow, you refused to bloom. And the pansies, they look to you so eagerly. Sisters, open your eyes. Stretching, clenching, ready to burst when I returned, you were fallen, your necks snapped, whacked to the ground. Our little girls, eyes white against their rumpled velvet faces, peered up at the space you once held. It was a careful cut. He made them watch. Before the peonies could sing, your never blushing buds were wrinkled noses lost in mulch. My planted prelude for love left splinters. He wanted me gone and the girls wanted to stay. And so I left our garden in June. But never mind me, dear poppies, you are special. The Persian flower of love. Your kind flutters freely through fields in the east, and here with us you can find the morning light. Let the hushed winds of March coax you up, out, and through. From the depths soar past the chimney behind you, and kindle the fire within. Your translucent petals snatching the sun, becoming the sun. My flower, you are of the heartbeat variety, whose blooms blend wine with blood. You are the new heart of this home. Its front door stained the red of slapped cheeks, of freckles on fire, the shade I once blushed when his and my noses nodded. No. Eskimo kisses turned cold. The red flag will call for mail that may never come or go, for apologies too far gone to fly. Amidst the quietude, fear not the riotous gales of winter, for you are not so frail, and neither are your icy sisters. Trust they will prevail, and you will rise. You'll reemerge in spring, blooms bursting with silky needles, seeds descending upon the sweating soil, your leaves settling to dust in summer. In this cycle, you are safe, for he who cuts you down builds you up. He risks your roots running wild. He forces your growth. Ladies of the land, the person who breaks you makes you bloom brighter. My poppies, flutter or fall, both are your fate. Promise me this. Even when your parchment petals waver, you'll forever remind your maker of when I left our garden in June.
I'm going to meander a bit talking about H.D. with poetry responses and finish with an H.D. poem that many of you out there will know. I'm Lynn Alexander, and I'm honored to be able to share this response, Radical Freedom, and I appreciate the spirit of finding H.D. in the secret. A lot of my writing, art, poems confront shoulds and shame, expectations, things that we expect of women, and that's what first drew me to H.D., the idea of throwing off the shoulds as a radical act. So this is Closer Than the Moon. On daughters, having been the surviving girl to a mother who felt even more the pressure to be rooted as a woman of her time, she lived in possession of the gift, as vessel, a bridge of generations with vacillating optimism. H.D. described herself as an unincarnated entity that has no place here, the unsatisfied duality. 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future, finding her way to stand upright in the present, in the now. Her father, a detached scientist described as pure New England, was said to have seen nothing closer than the moon. Were men permitted this while the transcendent inclinations of women were kept grounded, expectations, shoulds, customs, need, practicality, always a pull on the spirit, condemned to fraud, to negotiations, or worse, to acceptance? H.D. saw both the ground and the horizon, and she hovered there, her era permitting neither. Does one fight for the gift, for daughters? One does. That's radical freedom. Flowers to weeds. Feet from flowers to weeds, seeking she between the planets, between the sea veil, an era distant from the spanning time, years that cannot skip chronology, years in their rigid sequence, placing ages against their context, she a pivot to consequence, a convergence of these paths, but she, ever the descendant of intimate history, witch burners, and a pooling of distant genealogy unfused, she, him, her, them, they, born into the gardens. A blur through the water, the promised daughter, anew apart from any known today, of known feet, fatigue feet, wailed in flight, pulled up always against the body, from gravity and the inevitable touching down to stones. H.D. wrote to a friend, I sit at my typewriter until I drop. I have in some way to justify my existence. Promises then. Helen, Helen, come home. There was a Helen before there was a war, but who remembers her? And there were poets before the word poet, before the tasking of craft, before academic constructions, before poets were poets at all. Poets lived without evidence. Poets still live without evidence, without legacy, beneath tradition, nothing written, but the promise soaks in the words of a well that moves through, whose gentle rains reach the sky, finding their way to dirt, their way to being, to linking. Before there were words, they were held in the trees, in the weeds, held for anyone to reach. And poets both fed and tapped them, and wanting nothing but the cycle to continue in the tension they settled, waiting in those cells, waiting as in a womb, words now press what has been into being. What is pressed into being? Promises then? Why do we articulate through weeds, and who keeps us in the gardens? H.D. writes of an exchange between Odysseus and Calypso, who keeps him for 7 years. She doesn't ask for this intrusion. She doesn't seek it. But after giving him everything that he needs, clothing, wine, food, peace, what starts as a relationship resented becomes a bond that she is reluctant to release. I was alone, and now my beautiful peace has gone. Did I ask you here, she asks, if she whispered, worked a charm, there must have been some fault. In short, she doesn't want him. Isn't he drowned yet? Isn't he drowned yet? Now I am free, no one can find, no one can follow. Odysseus responded, but me. Calypso says, oh, you sand, this is my command. Drown all men in slow, breathless suffocation, then they may understand. After he leaves, she says, he has gone, he has forgotten. He took my lute and my shell of crystal. He never looked back, for man is a brute and a fool. In Eurydice, she tells her husband Orpheus, so for your arrogance and your ruthlessness, I have lost the earth and the flowers of the earth. I can't help but make the leap from the personal to the global, to the dynamics of misogyny, to the planet itself as female. She says, let us leave the place of a skull to those who fashioned it. H.D.'s response to the atomic age prophetic, sadly still relevant, extends the idea of a world before conquest, before power. Who remembers? I will finish with a poem by H.D. Many of you will know, Eurydice. See, you have swept me back, I, who could have walked with the live souls above the earth, I, who could have slept among the live flowers at last. So for your arrogance and your ruthlessness, I am swept back where dead lichens drip, dead cinders upon moss of ash. So for your arrogance, I am broken at last, I, who had lived unconscious, who was almost forgot. If you had let me wait, I had grown from listlessness into peace. If you had let me rest with the dead, I had forgot you and the past. Here only flame upon flame and black among the red sparks, streaks of black and light grown colorless. Why did you turn back that hell should be re-inhabited, of myself thus swept into nothingness? Why did you glance back? Why did you hesitate for that moment? Why did you bend your face, caught with the flame of the upper earth above my face? What was it that crossed my face with the light from yours and your glance? What was it you saw in my face? The light of your own face, the fire of your own presence? What had my face to offer but reflex of the earth hyacinth color caught from the raw fissure in the rock where the light struck, and the color of azure crocuses and the bright surface of gold crocuses and of the wind flower swift in its veins as lightning and as white. Saffron from the fringe of the earth, wild saffron that has bent over the sharp edge of earth, all the flowers that cut through the earth, all the flowers are lost. Everything is lost. Everything is crossed with black, black upon black, and worse than black, this colorless light. Fringe upon fringe of blue crocuses, crocuses walled against blue of themselves, blue of that upper earth, blue of the depth upon depth of flowers, lost flowers. If I could have taken once my breath of them, enough of them, more than earth, even then of the upper earth had passed with me beneath the earth, if I could have caught up from the earth the whole of the flowers of the earth, if once I could have breathed into myself the very golden crocuses and the red and the very golden hearts of the first saffron, and the whole of the golden mass, and the whole of the great fragrance, I could have dared the loss. So for your arrogance and your ruthlessness, I have lost the earth and the flowers of the earth, and the live souls above the earth, and you who passed across the light and reached ruthless. You who have your own light, who are to yourself a presence, who need no presence. Yet for all your arrogance and your glance, I tell you this, such loss is no loss. Such terror, such coils and strands and pitfalls of blackness, such terror is no loss. Hell is no worse than your earth above the earth. Hell is no worse, no, nor your flowers, nor your veins of light, nor your presence a loss. My hell is no worse than yours, though you pass among the flowers and speak with the spirits above earth. Against the black, I have more fervor than you in all the splendor of that place. Against the blackness and the stark gray, I have more light. And the flowers, if I should tell you, you would turn from your own fit paths toward hell, turn again and glance back, and I would sink into a place even more terrible than this. At least I have the flowers of myself, and my thoughts, no God can take that. I have the fervor of myself for a presence, and my own spirit for light, and my spirit with its loss knows this, though small against the black, small against the formless rocks, hell must break before I am lost. Before I am lost, hell must open like a red rose for the dead to pass.
Hello, my name is Katherine Falk, and I'm delighted to be here this evening with my esteemed friends and poets, and to celebrate radical freedom, poets on the life and work of H.D. And I'd like to say a special shout out to Cleveland Wall for putting this together. Many thanks and much appreciation. H.D. was about 20 years older than my grandmother, yet as modern as today in her work, her research, her understandings and perceptions. To my thinking, she lived the kind of life that seems complete. After flunking out of Bryn Mawr College, where she met her lifelong friend and writing equal Marianne Moore, H.D. went abroad and stayed there against her parents' wishes as the war broke out. She was in London amidst bombings, and she searched for sense and to create new responses and salvation through her writing. H.D. was analyzed by Sigmund Freud for 3 months before he pronounced her a poet and told her to remember her dreams and that she did not need lengthy analysis. Her interests, H.D.'s interests, are my interests, particularly religion, and her thoughts about religion and war and inclusion are akin to my thoughts. I am struck especially by her notion that all religions are the same. I know really one religion, one big one. I've lived and worked where she lived, Bethlehem, Philadelphia, and London, and visited some of the places she visited. She loved to travel. Some lines of H.D.'s from the first part of her trilogy, The Walls Do Not Fall, seem particularly relevant today. I'll read 8 couplets, and then I quote the last 2 couplets in one of my offerings that'll follow. Evil is active in the land. Good was impoverished and sad. Ill promised adventure. Good was smug and fat. Dev ill was after us, tricked up like Jehovah. Good was the tasteless pod, stripped from the manna beans, pulse, lentils. They were angry when we were so hungry for the nourishment, God. They snatched off our amulets. Charms are not, they said, grace. But God's always face 2 ways. So let us search the old highways for the true rune, the right spell. Recover old values. My first offering is a poem. It's actually an epistle, so a poem in the form of a letter. Dear H.D., the sea sends wave after wave after restless wave as a plague spews its spit on people worldwide now. A song of pain rises during our divided time, 2 sides, 2 views, separate or attached. Are clouds over sea marshes separate or attached from and to the current, as they seem to float with the same tempo, the same gravitational pull? Let's say we're stuck in the extreme fuddle predicted by the Mayans, alternating 5,000-year cycles. Savagery, civilization, savagery. That we completed a 5,000-year cycle of civilization in the year 2000. Perhaps a why for how it's come to this. Our darkened sky that lost its own sun and moon, as differences between people prevail. Where are you now, H.D., and can your knowing be channeled to help us move beyond the savagery tunnel we seem to be in on our stomachs in the mud with little fresh air? Can your timeless contributions move us from savagery to sacralization to light? The way you took religion in your hand and squeezed all the visions into one, propelled theories and fancies out to the multiverse in an orbiting globe, outside time and the clatter of the eons, to create something new, to help eliminate war-igniting differences. I sit in the same Quaker meeting house you did, with silence deep as a well. As the deepness overtakes and connects us, we descend by ladder to a desert outside, at the crossroads of continents. A desert spanned by ancestors from the beginning of time that hold hands with us now and with descendants ahead. People of all time connected to listen carefully to the music of the silence, to generate electricity from the connections, to lighten the dark, to chant for equity, life that can be trusted, as neighbors forget their neighbors, as poison vines thicken, send out their venom, and the people wait for a potion to cure the ills, an amulet as the poison vines grow ever hardier, their threatening reach thick and troubling. Your words echo to remind potential, to reclaim power. for the sun to ignite itself again and piece the shattered horizon back together. Each beehive a space, a year, a person that lived, lives, or will live, lined up, cheering during this time, as when you wrote, but God's always face two ways. So let us search the old highways for the true rune, the right spell, recover our values. I'm going to read two poems that are about the beach. They were inspired by H.D.'s poems from her first collection called Sea Garden. The first is called Beach Plums, and this is a beach plum, and this is its stem that's a little dry now, but I want you to see this little globe. Beach plums. Wild fruit of sand dune shrubs, smaller than some plums, larger than cherries, with 5 mohawk narrow leaves, dark green out your top, that exceed your length. You emit ideas of fire, of the sun, with evolving color each week up until you ripen. And beyond, bright stages of fire color, you, from persimmon to amaranth red, to crimson, to cadmium red, to cardinal. You live in the company of purple and white beach flowers, along with your own flowers, thanks to cross-pollination, the whole array of wildlife, deer, porcupines, cottontails, grouse, foxes, opossums, raccoons, black bear, eat your thin layer of fruit that surrounds ivory seeds that tastes like persimmon mixed with sweet orange pepper. Small suns at their rise and set resemble you, their model, miniature dune suns, sturdy suns, rows and rows at the ready. And next is beach stone display. The beach provides outdoor galleries when the tide retreats after it strews the wet sand with stones of all sizes and shapes, black, sand, gray, orange, blue, purple, white. Some sparkle as if diamonds are lodged throughout. A collection of quartz, some smooth or sculpted or hot to the touch, beckon. They shine like crown jewels worn by Neptune, who watches from afar. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine, and thanks to all of the readers who've contributed. I love this group of poets, and I'm so glad that I got to do this with you all. So now comes my response to H.D.'s work. Like most people who had encountered her work at all, I'd seen the anthology stuff, the very early Imagist stuff, which is just like the faintest breath of her entirety of work. And it really is a shame that more people don't see her larger body of work. What I keyed into when looking at her work was the trilogy, where she is really at the height of her powers and just taking up as much space as she needs to take, as long as she needs to say what she needs to say. And she is just on fire in this book. I hope you will check it out, this trilogy. So I wanted to start off with reading a couple of excerpts from that. This is from the second book, Tribute to the Angels. This is, I don't know if they're called cantos or psalms. They feel like psalms. I'm going to say psalms. Psalm 8. Now polish the crucible, and in the bowl distill a word most bitter, Marah, a word bitterer still, Mar. Sea, brine, breaker, seducer, giver of life, giver of tears. Now polish the crucible and set the jet of flame under, till Mar, Marah are melted, fuse and join, and change and alter, Mare, Mir, Mare, Mater, Maria, Mary, star of the sea, mother. And the other piece that I would like to read now from Trilogy is from the third book, Flowering of the Rod. And both of these, the previous and this one, are really bring forward her reclaiming of the divine feminine. As Jennie had mentioned in the introduction, there's this thread in Moravian theology that had kind of been dropped, of the divine feminine, and she's reclaiming that in these works. So this is from the Flowering of the Rod, Psalm 34. And it is in a part where Mary of Magdalene is going to get the incense from Caspar the wise man, and it's not really right for her to appear on her own in the market, and that is what prompts this. This is Caspar. Then as he dropped his arm in the second half-second, his mind prompted him, even as his mind must sharply differentiate, clearly define the boundaries of beauty. Hedges and fences and fortresses must defend the innermost secrets, even the hedges and fortresses of the mind, so his mind thought. Though his spirit was elsewhere and his body functioned, though he himself was not there, and his mind framed the thought, the last inner defense of a citadel, now lost. It is unseemly that a woman appear disordered and disheveled. It is unseemly that a woman appear at all. And that was certainly a message that H.D. received early on in life, and rejected, which is what I love about her, and why the theme that I latched onto in putting this together was radical freedom, because what she did is just live as she needed to live to be free. And it's an example to everyone, not even just women. I mean, I see it from a feminist perspective, but that is true of everyone. And so this poem is for her. This is my poem for H.D., Unseemly Woman. O star of Bethlehem, unruly native, your too much verve burst into sea poppy, sea rose, sea lily, and turbulent pine that pined for another shore. What hedge could hem you in? Your twin nature mirrored in twin loves, stars and sea. Is not all celestial mother, Our Lady of the Goldfinch, Our Lady of the Candelabra, Lady of Jellyfish, Lady of Interstellar Space. The angels are non-committal, but we have seen the broken alabaster heart, the amber honeycomb, and we give praise for the upsurging sea wave, even as the crash foams white and loses itself in an eternity of fizz. And before I close, I have one more poem of H.D.'s to share, because I think she really needs to have the last word here. But I wanted to just say thank you to the Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium, who has made this possible with a grant. And I would also like to thank Ara Bar-Leib and Pam Wallace of Crowded Kitchen Players for filming this and bringing it to you. So thank you sincerely for that. And now I would like to give H.D. the last word. And it sort of is a homecoming, it seems to me. This is actually from the first book, The Walls Do Not Fall, the first book in the trilogy. And this is Psalm 23, which I don't know if she was thinking about the resonance with the other Psalm 23, but it certainly came to my mind. Take me home where canals flow between iris banks, where the heron has her nest, where the mantis preys on the river reed, where the grasshopper says, Amen, Amen, Amen. Thank you.